I call up the emergency service company. I'm like, I don't know what happened here. Your guy just
And then below that, you have those carriers that I think are really specialized in this space. They might only do investment property.
12, seventh grade. Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastriani, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right. Welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I am your host, Bob Mastriani. Today, I have with me Aaron Letzeiser. Aaron is the co-founder and COO of Obie, a venture-backed insurance and risk management technology platform serving the 17 million real estate investors in the United States. Obie's digital quotation platform and instant rate options make it the easiest and most transparent way in the market today for investors to obtain coverage. Prior to founding Obie, Aaron started and grew several successful companies that he's seen to an exit. In addition to his work at Obie, he is an active real estate investor, a venture partner at the San Francisco-based venture capital group Pioneer Fund. Aaron also graduated from Michigan State University and was named to Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Aaron, so great to have you on today.
Thanks, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing great. I going over your background a little bit and speaking before we started hitting the record button. There's definitely some questions I want to talk to you about, in the current real estate investing world and in the insurance world. I know there's some overlap there. I have a bit of a nightmare story I can jump into with you, but tell me a little bit about Obie, how you began and sort of what differentiates you in the business.
Sure. So got the company started several years ago. Actually co-founded the company with my brother Ryan. So his background was real estate private equity. He's the one that actually got me into real estate investing. And then I've always had a bit of a knack for the insurance space. I got my license when I was back in college to hustle my friends for their renters and their auto insurance. And Ryan, my brother, and I were standing around one day, and he like you, it sounds like, had a nightmare story as a real estate investor, and just overall felt like it was a pretty opaque and expensive process, right? It was one of the largest line item expenses he had as a real estate investor on each asset, and the one he felt like he had the least amount of control and insight into. And so that's really the origin story of Obie. We're an insurance technology company that's really solely focused today, although that's gonna change in the future. But focused right now on the residential real estate investor space. So whether you're a single family rental all the way up to your large multifamily units, or your complexes. Really just want to make that process easy, transparent, and for most assets around the country, we can rate, quote, and allow you to bind instantly online without really having to talk to anybody, which makes it pretty easy for you to underwrite your deals better, get a little bit more predictability, and just feel better about the overall experience.
That's great. That's great. And, it's interesting. And I'll sort of jump right into it. I'll tell you my story and one of the lessons that I learned, and I guess, it'd be great for you to share your thoughts and maybe some save some people the headache that I had. So 3-unit property in Philadelphia. It was Thanksgiving night. I still recall, the exact day because I was enjoying dinner with my family. I got a phone call from one of my tenants. Hey, we're having problems. The toilet's not flushing properly, right? Oh, okay. Let's see how we can help you out. Let's see if we can find a plumber. A little while later, he called me. We tried to flush again, and now it's backing up into the tub. I'll save the listeners some of the many gross details, but right. that's water finds a way to go wherever it wants to go. And then not long after that, I did the basic call, the local express service router type company and had them come out, emergency service, and they came out and they made a bit of a mistake in that the first thing they did was take the toilet off of the bolts that it was on, which forced all of the water to kind of come back up into the apartment. Well, it was a second floor apartment. All of that gross and disgusting water not only damaged that unit, but then it went down into the kitchen below it. And
water has a way of finding its way with gravity, right?
Yeah, not only that, it also seems to find its way to the places where you don't want it to be, right?
Yep.
Kitchen cabinets, stoves, all those sort of things. And so I call up the emergency service company. I'm like, I don't know what happened here. Your guy just took the toilet off, destroyed a bathroom, destroyed a kitchen. Like, this place is, an issue. And they said, don't worry about it. We'll send out our restoration team tomorrow morning and we'll get everything fixed for you. We'll be there 8 a.m. And, fortunately on the recorded line, they admitted that it was their fault. And so I get out there the next morning. I'm obviously in a panic, and the restoration team starts going right to town. They're testing everything that had soiled water on it and ripping it out, right? These cabinets, they test them, soiled water on them, rip them out. The walls, ceilings, floors, all sorts of stuff. And the long and short story of it is that my insurance company said that it was not covered because, water damage from a tenant filled unit would not be covered. And it was a lot of back and forth. And fortunately, the company that did the damage wound up taking responsibility and making us whole, but it was a bit of a nightmare process. And so, at that point, here I was. That was my first investment property. It was a 3-unit property in Philadelphia.
Oh.
And I still have the property today. So I guess it didn't scar me too much. That was 11 years ago. But I didn't even think to ask, is water damage covered when I have tenants? And so I guess that sort of brings me back around to, first of all, what would you recommend in a situation like that? And what are new investors missing? What are the key items related to insuring a property, especially when it's an investment property that's going to have somebody else living in it? What are they missing? What are the good things to look for?
Yeah, well, I sympathize with your story because it's always the first property you buy, right, that has the problems, and it's always a holiday or Friday at 5 p.m.,
Yes,
right? Like,
yes.
that is just always what happens. And that's when you get people got they make the comments and they're like, buy an investment property, they said. It'll be easy to be a landlord. It's hands off, right? It's always the first one. It goes up from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean
it's always a toilet.
oh man, it's always water. It's always water. Either frozen water or dripping water, one way or the other. Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like you didn't have water backup coverage, right? Like with a tenant in there.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean that's one of those add-on items that like it's an extra endorsement that for the most part, is one of those things where like when your agent's first pulling a quote, like it's not the thing that's automatically already added in,
Mhm.
right? So your agent's got to go down there and kind of check the boxes for some of those things, and that's down there with, do you want siding matching, right? Do you want roof matching? Do you want to make sure your shingles match, right? Like some of the stuff that you're like, I really don't want to spend an extra $100 a year, $200 a year on. But I would say that there's three things probably for a real estate investor to make sure that they focus on, things that, even being in this space, my brother and I have learned the hard way with our rental properties. The first one, and probably the most important, is like your replacement cost coverage, right? So that's the total value of the actual property. Um, Especially given the inflationary market that we're in, and like insurance is hardening as well. We've had a lot of weather events, a lot of weird stuff that's been happening. Carriers have been taking on a lot of losses, so they're not as lenient as they might have once been on the way that they actually read their contract language. So we've seen investors that, they insured the property when they bought it 10 years ago, and they've been insuring it for, 65, $70 a square foot in markets that you wouldn't be able to rebuild a shack for less than $140 a square foot. And so what you don't want to have happen is the tragic, worst case scenario. And of course with tenants, right? Somebody walks away from the stove, kitchen catches fire, burns the place down, total loss. Well, what ends up happening then is you don't have enough coverage to actually rebuild the property. And if you have debt on the property, which 97% of people do, the bank's going to say, you know what? I don't want to deal with this. Just give us our portion of the amount, and we're just going to walk away, right? And so now you don't even have that portion of that check to help you rebuild that property. So we have tragically seen sometimes folks that just have kind of a burned out property that it would cost them money to just even remediate the property, right? Just like actually clear away all of the burned out rubble. And they don't even have the portion from the lender, right? And most of these lenders own 50, 60, 70% sometimes, depending on how long you've owned it. So that's the first thing, is in this market where lumber costs have gone up, a lot of other things, definitely double check, right? and I say this with love as an agent, it's the easiest thing in the world to do for an agent to just allow you to renew easily on the same terms that you've had for the last 3, 5, 7, 10 years,
Hmm.
right? Double check that coverage. It's called coverage A on most policies. You just want to divide that by the square footage of the property. And if it seems too low for you, probably is, right? Just get it updated. That's the first thing. The second thing is the one you already talked about, right? Water backup. Outside of weather events and fire inside of the property, water damage is probably like your, top 2, top 3 reasons for a claim, right? And that's something that more often than not you can kind of control the outcome with, right? To be proactive, right? Telling the tenant, here's how you turn off the water to some of these things. Um, we've had clients that go as far as, on a move-in hack it, like they make the people actually like watch a YouTube video, right? That they recorded in the unit that's like it's 30 seconds long. This is how you turn the water off, because it would shock you how many people have never even thought about that before. So that's the first thing. I would always ask about that. And then the second thing is, in the event that you're in an older property, especially in an urban area, you want to get something called ordinance and law coverage, right? This is the sneaky one that always, I think, rears its ugly head for people. And what that means is, in the event that you have a claim, and that claim has impacted something where something in your property is not up to current code, right? You've been grandfathered in, whatever that might be. Well, when you file that claim and have to make the repair, you now have to bring it up to code. So it's not just the cost to actually replace the plumbing or the connection out to the plumbing out in the street. And you had a certain type of material in your pipes, and now it needs to be, whatever the city requires and the municipality requires.
Hmm.
That ordinance and law coverage is going to cover that increase in cost. And that could be a bunch of things. That could be the way that you actually rebuild your structure, the way that you, rebuild an addition, the way that you're, doing your plumbing or your electrical in the property, things that can really contribute to an extra 5, 10, 15, $20,000 that you weren't thinking about, because that's not how the structure was originally built before you had this loss. So those are the 3 main items that I think most people overlook. And unfortunately, as you've seen, right, those are the situations that come up. Undoubtedly, whether that's Christmas Eve, Thanksgiving, right, Sunday morning, something at 2 o'clock in the morning, right, where you're calling the emergency roto-rooter folks to come out. Those are the coverages that you're going to want to have.
Well, and it's interesting that you spoke about the renewal replacement cost, and I guess we see it all over the place, right? I can think of, a few of the properties that I own that I've had for, 8, 9, 10, 12 years. And obviously the value has significantly increased, and maybe we didn't refinance. So the note that's on it isn't nearly where, that value is. And if our coverage is still where we kept it from the day we purchased it, then obviously that coverage is not going to cover replacement costs, not going to cover the value of what the property is. Only on one occasion, and I guess I've been doing this probably for about 15 years now, there was only one occasion where I actually had one of the banks, and it's a local bank that I've used as a lender, actually reached out to me and said, hey, we're going to request that you reassess, because, here's what you have as replacement costs of the property. Yes, it'll cover the mortgage, but we don't think it'll cover the property enough.
Yep.
And the increase wasn't significant. The cost to increase that coverage wasn't significant enough that it was going to break the bank. And even when you spoke about that, that water damage, that extra rider on the water damage, right? You said like $100 a year or something like that
Oh
over the
yeah.
course of 12 months. I mean, that's like $8 a month. But that peace of mind, I think my damage was somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000, and that doesn't even count the loss of rents and all of those kind of things. So that extra $100 a year would have made a huge difference in the scenario that I'm talking about.
Totally right. And I think there's 2 different types of real estate investors, and you see this especially with the newer folks, or people that just generally want to be able to sleep really well at night, knowing that, yeah, they might have spent an extra 2, 3, 4, $500 a year in insurance, but and yes, that's impacted their bottom line, that's impacted the value of the property or what they might be doing or their cash flow, but they do know that if something happens, that they are going to be protected. And then you have your others that really, I think, look at insurance as another lever on their balance sheet and on their P&L to be able to make the, the numbers work and make sure that the cash flow works. And what I would tell you and your listeners is that there are places in your policy that you can play with those levers, right? And that's really where Obie originally came from. Is the challenges, and one of the areas that I think people can look at is don't skimp on the cover, like don't skimp on your water backup. If
Mm,
you want to make sure that the price is going to be competitive or you want to pay a little bit less, then take the gamble on the deductible, right? We've seen plenty of people where they're at $1,000 deductible, but they're comfortable at a 5,000, maybe even a $10,000 deductible, because they're able to add all these other coverages where they're like, you know what, I can sleep a little better at night knowing that in the event that water issue does hit, if it's going to be more than $5,000, I'll use my insurance for it, right?
mm,
Then it makes sense.
yeah.
That's where that's where people can actually play around with some of that stuff. So that way they know that they actually have the coverages that they want, and they'll use it if the issue is big enough to actually warrant that that insurance claim. And that's what we wanted to be able to do. That is I still remember the first question or the conversation Ryan and I had about this. We were standing there and he was like, hey, I want to know what the different combinations could be. I'm trying to run my numbers for the next year. I'm trying to work on my budget for all these assets that we own. And I want to ask my agent, well, what does it look like at $1,000 deductible? What does it look like at a 5,000 or a 10,000 or a $25,000 deductible, right? Like, what does that look like? And then what's the price if I add on water backup? What's the price if I add on ordinance and law? What's the price if I do a different combinations, right? What if I add on more replacement cost? And the way that the typical industry runs is every single one of those is an individual PDF generated quote, right? And no agent's going to want to sit there. I wouldn't want to do that. And you also don't want to go through 50 different PDFs of quotes. And so we wanted to be able to build something where you could get to the end of that process and sit there, till your heart's content, right? And just play around with those combinations and see those price changes dynamically on the screen. And then you feel really good about the coverage that you actually purchased, right? You would have had a different claims experience on your water backup had you looked at that issue and say, you know what? I did actually see that that was an option and I didn't want to spend the extra $100, right? I took that risk. Whereas you got surprised, right? When you found out, wow, this actually isn't covered and I wish I would have known, right? And that sours your experience.
Yeah. And I think also, as we continue to look at properties and markets change and everything changes, we kind of looking back on that experience and my experiences today. I think one of the other mistakes that many newer investors make, and I probably fell into this, which is how I wound up in that situation, is insurance becomes a secondary thought. It becomes a secondary thought of the process. We're so focused on getting the financing, getting the funding, making the deal work, going through the inspection. And then to some extent, it's like, well, the mortgage company is not going to let you close unless you get this place insured. So, all right, what many people do is like, oh, who do I have my homeowners through currently? Let me
Yep.
just call them and get a quote. So, at what stage in the process and what are the things from a multifamily investor perspective, what are the things that they should be looking at and what stage of the process should they bring you in? I mean,
I would say if you're going out to market and you're looking for a potential acquisition, I would get your insurance agent involved as early as possible,
mm,
right? And the reason being is when you're trying to go hard on cash, you put in for an LOI, you want to feel really comfortable with the numbers that are inside of that offering memorandum and what's inside of the pro forma.
yeah,
And the challenge is on the insurance side, and this hasn't been as big of an issue over the last probably decade, but it's certainly becoming an issue over the last probably 24 months with the way the insurance market is heading. And the challenge is that you don't know about the buy, like you don't know about the seller, right? You're
hmm,
going to look at that T12 number on insurance, and you don't know if Blackstone's really the owner behind that, right? Did they pool their insurance? Like Blackstone's got industry best rates, right? I can't I
yeah,
can't compete with that all day long. And so you really want to gut check the number that you see on the page, right? That might also be bare bones coverage, right? These people right before they went to go sell it might have just decided, hey, we're 6 to 8 months out from disposition. We know we're going to sell this. We want to move to like $100,000 deductible and the most bare bones coverage. So this thing looks great on pro forma, right? And so you want to be able to take that offering memorandum and send that over to your agent. Now, some agents, right, and some carriers, it's challenging for them because the process is still so archaic that it requires like manual underwriting. They're pulling all of those pieces of information out of the offering memorandum, they're putting them into a model, and then they want to know that you're actually going to close that business as an agent. And so one of the things that we've done at Obie is I can give you, depending on where it's at the country, either instantly or pretty close thereafter, a pretty good indication, right? The computer's really the one doing a large majority of the work. So you can ping us all day long, right? And gut check what that number is going to be. And you're not about to actually buy the property. We're going to have to learn a little bit more about it if you actually win the LOI. But we come usually within 2, 3, 4% plus or minus on what that estimate is going to be. And so I would say get your agent involved as early as possible, because what you don't want to have happen is you get that LOI accepted, you go hard on cash, and you find out your insurance costs are actually going to be 40% higher than what you thought they were going to be, right? That destroys what you think your annual NOI is going to be.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I think, in the current market and with all of the inflation that's happened and all the drastic changes in prices, I think we're seeing twofold there. Insurance and taxes both sort of fall into that very similar category when you're looking at a pro forma or when you're looking at the current owner's numbers. The same thing happens with taxes, right? That last owner bought it for 1/3 of what they're selling it for today. They're selling it for 3 times what they originally paid for it. And maybe the county didn't assess the taxes since then. They may assess only when there's a sale happening, right? So then you look at that previous owner's tax bill and you say, oh, okay, well, the numbers work with that tax bill. And then you sort of get a reality check January 1st of the next year when the county comes back and says, guess what? Your taxes went up because you paid X amount of dollars for the property. And I assume similar thing with insurance, in that you don't know exactly how much coverage they have, right? In the same way, if they bought it for a significantly lower amount, maybe they didn't increase for the last 10 years. They didn't increase replacement costs. So that idea of really looking at the previous owner's numbers is one that I think does get a lot of investors caught up in their numbers. Trust me, I only pay $1,200 a year in insurance.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter when I'm going to pay $3,000, right? That's a difference maker. Or
Yeah, I mean,
add
and
zeros.
for the last decade, the Southeast, right, in the U.S. and the Sun Belt has been the predominant area for investment capital in the multifamily space, especially in the value add space. And Florida's been battered, right?
Mhm.
Louisiana's been battered. The southeast part of Texas, Harris County, Houston, right? Like very popular areas to buy value add multifamily has been just battered by both storms as well as like a lot of insurance claims litigation, a lot of stuff that's just driving up insurance costs. And so, you know, eh, I think that brings me to an interesting point, which is no matter the type of insurance that you're working on, and no matter the type of like investment property that you're getting in, you want to find an agent that really specializes in that space and in that industry, right? You talked about earlier, buying an investment property, maybe go to the person that does your home and auto, and they might be the right person, right? I'm not saying they're not, but you want to find out just how much business your agent does in the real estate investment space. Because there's really 3 tiers of opportunities. There's your traditional kind of run-of-the-mill carriers that exist out there, right? Your Travelers, your State Farms, your Allstates, they have a commercial policy. They can help you out, right? It's going to be competitive-ish pricing. And then below that, you have those carriers that I think are really specialized in this space. They might only do investment property types of insurance. These are specialized carriers that really just focus on that. They're going to give you even more competitive pricing because they know that space like the back of their hand. But
Mm.
they're only going to work with agents that send them a good amount of volume, right? It's not worth it for them to just deal with somebody that's going to, do something with them once or twice a year. And then beyond that, those same agents that really specialize in this space, there are specific programs, right, that exist out there that are specific to a region or specific to a state that just focus maybe on multifamily insurance, right? There are programs that just do Texas multifamily insurance or just do the Southeast or just do the Midwest, right? But again, those agents are only going to get access to that program if they do a good amount of volume with those carriers.
Hmm.
Right. And so that's something they really want to focus on. And it's really, it goes back to that idea around like things very much being local. Like you want somebody that knows that market, because when you show them that offering memorandum, you show them how much per door they're spending on insurance. Obie's a national, a national company in this space. I can tell you in most, MSAs at this point, if, your per door price is going to look out of whack from where the pricing is going to come in at. And same thing as you mentioned on the taxes, right? It's worth the extra maybe 100 to $200 to find, whoever the prominent property tax appeal law firm is, and
Mm-hmm.
just run it by them, right? Like if you think that this is a deal that works, assuming the property taxes work, it's worth the $200 to just go run this by them and say, hey, can you take a look at this property, right? Here's the offer memorandum. This county and this county assessor probably better than anybody. Is this going to go up? And is it going to go up by how much? Right? It's worth it when you're buying a, 5, 7, 10, 15, $20 million asset.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. That's great info. I really appreciate that. I want to transition over. This is the Healthy Investor Podcast, and I love to talk to successful investors, entrepreneurs like yourself, and talk about any healthy habits or routines that play an integral part in your day, in your life, and in your journey.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. One thing that I actually started 3 days ago. So starting January 1st, we do, in my house at least, 30 days of yoga, like 30
Oh,
days of
okay.
mindful yoga, right? So at least like 30 minutes every day. We try and make it a practice throughout the rest of the year, but it is something where we can try and get it done every single day. Start the year off right, start to feel good. Obviously, like physical exercise is great. It's a great way to clear the mind, and it's also, most real estate investors, most entrepreneurs, our minds are going all the time, and it's an opportunity to, I think, unplug from the computer and the day to day and our phones and the emails, and focus on something that requires a lot of physical activity and exertion to be able to do that. And then the third thing, at least for me, is sleep.
Hmm.
Right? Like I've got two little kids at home, but I've got to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. I think it's super important, both mentally and just to recover physically. And that's where we're at our best every day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love all those answers, and yoga is something that I've intermittently added in and out of my practice. You know, for me, it's a little bit better than just doing stretching exercises. Yoga
Yep.
also has a little bit of a mindset and mental focus around it too, which is also a great thing. And sleep and it's funny. I've talked about this a few times on my podcast, so I don't want to go too deep, but I was a night owl, quote unquote. I was I can stay up late and then get up early and go to work in the morning. And then, when I realized that the morning was such an important part of my day, I realized I had to change my sleeping habits, and you have to rest to be your best. And
Yeah.
and that's such an important and pivotal part of the journey. So very
Couldn't
cool.
agree.
Um, all right, cool. Well, I want to transition over to the final questions. I ask the same three questions of every guest who comes on the show. First question for you is, what is your definition of success?
Yeah, I think for me, like a definition of success is feeling a fulfillment in the job and the role and the things that I spend my time on, and being able to continue to uh, grow in a way that I continue to join and find happiness in the work that I'm doing. That's success.
Awesome. Awesome. Second question, for someone who's newer to investing or even just learning to focus on their goals and path to success, do you have a good book recommendation?
Uh, it's not real estate specific. I just read a good book called Never Split the Difference.
Ah, okay.
It's a favorite of a lot of people. I think his name's Chris Voss,
Yep.
if I remember correctly. Really good concepts there. He was an FBI hostage negotiator, but that was helpful. I think both as a real estate investor and just in life, some good lessons to be learned from that.
Yeah, very good book. I actually had the ability to see Chris at an event. I was at Multifamily Mastery 6 in Orlando I guess October, it's just past October, and he was one of the speakers. He spoke for about an hour.
Wow.
Interesting. It's interesting how some of the things that he's talking about negotiating are a little bit out of the realm of some of our everyday conversations, right? You mentioned he's in hostage negotiation, and it's about people's lives and all those sort of things. But then
Yep.
he has a great way of bringing it back to just normal everyday life. Interesting thing that he said is the most widely used negotiation skill is mirroring. So I thought that was pretty interesting, but he talks a lot about that in the book. So great
Yep.
recommendation. Yeah. So before we get to the final question, first of all, I want to thank you for coming on, Aaron. This has been really cool. I haven't had anyone else on that speaks about insurance or insuring properties, and especially from an investment perspective. So I know this absolutely is going to add value to our listeners. How can we support you, and how can people reach out to you and touch base?
Yeah, so people can find us at our website. It's obieinsurance.com. Obie is spelled OBIE insurance.com. They can send me an email too. It's Aaron@obieinsurance.com. Happy to field any questions, and happy to be a resource for folks in the real estate space as it relates to insurance.
Awesome. So final question for you. If you can think back with me to a young Aaron around the ages of 8 to 12 years old, knowing what you've learned so far in your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to that young Aaron, or really any preteen age child, to help guide them towards success?
Ooh. Let's see. 3 pieces of advice. I would say continue to beat at the beat of your own drum, right? Do one thing and do it well, right? And continue to learn, right? Just continue to be a sponge, right? Like if I think about that 8 to 12-year-old, I'd say, you're gonna sit in a lot of classes in high school and college, and you're gonna look back in your 20s and be like, wow, I wish I paid attention just a little bit more. The concept's really interesting now, right? And now that I'm older and I'm not forced to sit in that classroom, like, wow, can people just like go back and like sit in the back of the classroom and just kind of listen and read some of this stuff? Because now I appreciate it, right? So there's a lot more that you can gain when you tweak your perspective.
It's so interesting. I'm sitting here laughing because I have a daughter who's in that age group. She's actually 12, 7th grade. And there are some topics that, we're helping with homework, or maybe it's something science related. And I'm like, I don't remember learning this. This is pretty cool. And the truth is, I probably just was like, it was
Oh,
just a mental shift. I probably just wasn't interested, or wasn't
yep,
putting the right mindset into it. And now I'm learning it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
yep.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate your time. Make sure you reach out to them if you received value from this. Again, Obie Insurance, and it's Aaron Letzeiser. Sorry about that.
You got it.
All right. Go out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.